Bleep-a-ba-bum. Number 1 is Moonring. Your every footstep in Moonring is a tiny contract with the universe. You move one tile, and then the world takes its turn. That simple rule turns Caldera into a clockwork board game where travel, fights, and even weather advance only when you do. So wandering is never just wandering. It is choosing when danger gets to act. The premise is old school, a neon-lit top-down fantasy world under strange moons, gods handing out gifts, and a player character with enough freedom to poke at the settings' power structures. The overall look is that of bright sprites on stark black, with a dense HUD that tracks much more than just your sword arm, so you spend as much time reading the screen as you do reading the land. The complexity manifests in overlapping systems that keep stepping on each other's toesies. First, that step-based time means planning becomes a resource. Crossing a swamp, backing out of a bad hallway, or taking one more step is a decision with a cost, because threats and conditions only need you to blink once to get their turn. Second, survival and interface pressures stack up fast, with meters like health, energy, food, and light all asking for attention at the same time, with a scrolling log that joyfully documents your mistakes as if it's writing down patch notes for your ego. The third are the gods' gifts, which add another layer because their use changes with moon phases, so power is not only about what you have, it's about when it decides to behave, which pushes you to adapt your approach instead of locking into one perfect routine. Fourth is the hidden magic system, which turns knowledge into loot. Spells are assembled from verbal syllables plus a material component, and some effects even ask for little ritual movement before you yell the word. Cast too freely and you can earn divine consequences, which make magic a credit card with a very personal interest rate. Meanwhile, the overworld invites long routes and risky shortcuts, and the dungeons reshuffle when you leave or die. Add sailing and ship fights as a separate travel layer, and your simple trip to town can become an afternoon of cascading choices. But it's free, so, what more could you want? Number 2, definitely not fried chicken. A fried chicken storefront is your handshake with the neighborhood, and the locked back room is where the real balance sheet lives. Definitely Not Fried Chicken drops you into a definitely sun-soaked 1980s city as an entrepreneur who grows drug operations through legitimate fronts, and then expands by acquiring more businesses, meeting new clientele, and developing stronger product until the whole town is basically running on your receipts. While the premise is simple, the game does a fantastic job of keeping you in that delicious management space, where upgrades always feel rewarding, and each new building is another mouth that'll need feeding. Naturally, the depth shows up with how the systems start elbowing each other for the same time, staff, and cash. Your production chain can begin with growing raw ingredients, and then drying and processing them into something sellable, which means layout, staffing, and timing become relevant because neither crops nor workstations care that you were too busy admiring your pretty new neon sign. Expanding your network spawns a logistical layer, since deliveries and vehicles make the difference between having product and getting paid. Not to mention, scaling up pushes you into schedules, task assignment, and the type of workforce wrangling where a single missing role can stall an entire pipeline. Then there's the pressure from outside walls. Once the money starts flowing, the police can demand bribes, and refusing can trigger raids on your facilities, so your budget is never expanding negotiation with consequences. That threat feeds directly back into base design and security spending, because defensive setups and guards can shape how painful a raid becomes, which changes how willing you are to gamble on saying no the next time someone wants a cut. Even your labs demand environmental control, with heaters and humidity tools to keep production from going sideways, so growth turns into a constant contest between efficiency, safety, and attention. In DNFC, success is building a chicken shop so convincing that even your own staff forget what they're carrying. Or maybe that's the product itself. Who knows? Number 3, Cube Chaos. It goes something like this. You pick a class and species, travel a node map for rewards, and then enter fights where you spend mana to place cubes that march, shoot, spawn, or trap until the enemy leader drops dead. Between battles, you are building an inventory of wacky tools and deciding what to bring into the next fight, as the game gives you a lot of control over your loadout, and it expects you to use it. However, the core question is always the same. What do I place now so the next 10 seconds can go reliably well? The head-scratching comes from how many systems will share share that same cube language, so bonuses that sound narrow can actually ricochet across your whole build. Perks can modify placed cubes, which means they can affect fighters, projectiles, traps, instant effects that briefly exist, and whatever else your factories spit out. So a harmless upgrade can turn into a strange battlefield side effect when gravity and collision get involved. Placement becomes its own discipline, because many cubes fall, stack, block, or create cover, so a strong piece dropped at the wrong moment can clog your own lane or protect the wrong target. And then there's the exchanges layer. Shops let you buy with debt, trades let you stack perks past sane limits, and both of those decisions lend into what your fights demand, because the curses you accept rattle the already shaky definition of safety. Upgrades and side upgrades add another twist, since boosting a cube can also put it on a limited use timer, so the game actually nudges you towards an ecosystem of pieces as opposed to one favorite button. Runs resolve by tightening all the screws at once, with harder nodes, nastier curses, and more demanding enemy setups, and the constant temptation to squeeze in another multiplier now and solve the consequences later, when it may be too late. Number 4. News Tower. Sunday in News Tower is not a deadline, it's a sentencing. All week long you're cranking out editions of a 1930s New York newspaper, and if the front page isn't hot enough to sell, you can kiss your coffee budget goodbye. The setup here is classic tycoon, but with more ink and moral compromise. Hire reporters, chase leads, assign photos, stack articles, print, and pray. You're designing a whole vertical newsroom, floor by floor, with elevators that hate you and bathrooms that probably violate city code. Each edition has to be built like a meal: headlines, fillers, ads, flavor, and a dash of scandal. Run out of time and you're serving an empty plate with a lot of excuses. It starts simple: assign reporter, get article, but then everyone wants to unionize by way of being extremely bad at multitasking. Writers need facts, photos need dark rooms, editors drag their feet on grammar, and at this point you're 6 hours behind because nobody remembered to operate the press. Added in space fights, no, not those space fights, article space fights, and now the high-paying booze ad might knock your war coverage off the page, but honestly, what's more American than that? Meanwhile, the literal tower turns into a logistical hostage situation. If your ink runners can't reach the print room in time, or if the elevator becomes a workplace drama, your issue dies on the vine. And then come the rivals, the politicians, the perception system, and the shady deals where you take a hit piece in exchange for rent money. The news is a product, and you're the factory manager wondering if ethics are tax deductible. Number 5. Reentry, a spaceflight sim. You want complexity? Well, I'll give it to you. Reentry treats spaceflight like an exam that you forgot to study for, except the pencil's on fire and the whole of existence is vibrating. It's a hands-on simulation of early NASA missions, covering Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, where your job is to operate the capsule without embarrassing yourself on a historical level. You'll play through a career as an astronaut, running missions that mirror real-life flights, alongside training scenarios designed to test whether you actually understand what all those damn switches do. Most of your time is spent inside the cockpit, flipping breakers, managing panels, and consulting checklists, because this game is only truly interested in whether you remember to turn the right thing on before something important turns itself off. Of course, the problem is that everything is connected and nothing is even mildly forgiving. Electrical systems feed guidance, guidance feeds control, and small mistakes snowball into problems like power loss, pressure issues, fires, or a spacecraft that flat out refuses to listen. Mission planning is just as important as execution, with burns and critical phases expected to be handled properly, and the game even autosaves around major decisions so you can reload and reflect on your confidence. Training only deepens the simulation, with realism settings, editable checklists, and cold and dark stars, which lets you choose exactly how much responsibility you want on your mind. And then it builds into full enthusiast territory, with external displays and live mission control setups where other players can actually run procedures alongside you. To play Reentry is to discover that spaceflight is a long chain of small, correct choices, and breaking even one of them gets very educational very fast. Number 6. Stranded, Alien Dawn. This game opens with a small group of survivors on a hostile planet, and the immediate discovery that building a base is a plan with the structural integrity of wet cardboard. It's a colony survival sim with a straightforward day-to-day loop. Gather materials, put up shelters, set up food, craft tools, treat injuries, and keep everyone functional long enough to become something sturdier than a mere campfire. Scenarios give the run its direction, whether that's working toward rescue, building a trading operation, or meeting a military-style objective, and the same handful of people have to do all the work while the environment keeps trying to reintroduce them to the concept of failure. Thus, the complexity arises in systems that keep borrowing from each other's oxygen. Labor is the first choke point, because every hour spent building is an hour not spent farming, researching, cooking, healing, or preparing defenses, and storms or injuries will show no mercy on poorly constructed schedules. Then personality and traits turn optimal into possible, since some survivors excel at specific tasks while others refuse whole categories of work. So a base that runs smoothly can still stall when the wrong person is assigned to the wrong job, or morale dips and productivity quietly slides downhill. Base design becomes a second puzzle as survival needs stack up, with storage flow, production chaining, comfort requirements like temperature and light, and later tech that invites automation and stronger defenses, which also creates new dependencies that can fail at the worst time. Research ties it all together with long-term planning and uncertainties, since breakthrough technologies can vary between playthroughs, so the correct solution changes and it always forces improvisation. Meanwhile, the planet applies pressure through weather and aggressive wildlife, pushing decisions about when to expand, about when to fortify, and when to stop being brave and start being prepared, plus optional difficulty tuning that can turn a slow build into a crisis carousel. And by the time the colony is stable, the real challenge is keeping it that way, while every system asks for more people that you just don't have. Put simply, it's a survival story told in work orders, and the planet highlights your errors in red ink. Number 7. Master of Command. The 7 Years' War in Master of Command is a forever ongoing argument between your stomach and your marching orders. You pick a major power, push an army across an overworld with fog of war, branching encounters and roaming enemy forces, and try to locate and destroy the enemy's main encampment before your campaign turns into an extended lesson on hunger. Towns and villages let you recruit and trade, but every detour has a cost, because terrain and travel pace affect how quickly you move and how fast your provisions evaporate. When a battle kicks off, you engage in real-time tactics where formations, morale, stamina, and terrain do most of the talking, so outnumbering your opponent only helps if your troops arrive with energy and nerve to stay in line when the flanks start getting spicy. This one sits below the true spreadsheet behemoths like War in the Pacific or Terra Invicta, in terms of raw system count at least, but it concentrates its sophistication with systems that never stop touching each other. Campaign decisions will shape battlefield performance in a very direct way, since pushing hard can get you to the next fight sooner while leaving units exhausted and brittle, and playing it safe can keep the army fresh while letting the enemy dictate the tempo of the war. The fights themselves demand discipline because morale and fatigue can swing outcomes just as much as firepower, and a line that starts to waver can drag neighbors with it if the formation is poorly supported. Persistence makes every victory expensive, with casualties carrying forward, units gaining experience, officers developing, and the revelation that veteran regiments are far from disposable. They're investments that you keep marching back into danger. Customization adds additional layers, since you can outfit units with choices like improved rifles, cylindrical ramrods for faster reloads, or even field musicians, because nothing says hold the line like a man with a flute doing his best in a cloud of musket smoke. The campaign escalates by tightening margins and stacking harder encounters, until the real challenge is staying disciplined when the game offers you a quick fight that turns into a week of recovery. Number 8. Deity Empires. In this game, you are the Empire's most expensive employee. We're dealing with a turn-based 4X where you choose a race and immediately get to work founding cities, extracting resources, and clearing monster lairs so that your farmers can plant things to eat without being eaten themselves. You're doing the usual expansionist chores, building towns, fighting battles, growing borders, but with one critical twist. Your god is not just a portrait in the UI, it's a fully functioning tactical unit that can materialize materialize to punch problems directly, or etherealize into a disembodied magical presence that casts from the sidelines like some kind of divine tech support hotline. But because this is a game about choices, you have to decide whether your empire is led by a glorious war beast or a spectral project manager with access to several hundred extremely aggressive spreadsheets. Nothing in this world is siloed. Materialized deities solve problems with muscle, but can't be everywhere at once, while ethereal gods cast global spells and manipulate battles from off-screen, at the cost of not being able to personally throw a fireball at the wolf that just ruined your economy. Magic itself is its own ecosystem. You'll manage separate pools for battle mana and world casting, which means the real late game is budgeting your divine temper tantrums. City growth and management isn't backburner BS either. You'll micromanage workers, upgrade roads to stuff more people onto each hex, and build the right infrastructure to keep the production loop from stalling when you run out of refined minerals and start rationing building projects like canned beans. Storage buildings become soft currency, since they let you hoard resources for future output bursts, which turns food and ore into semi-liquid strategy assets. And then of course resource logistics is a thing. You run wagons, escort hauls back to town, or stash gear in smaller cities with empty warehouse slots, because even dungeon loot has to be filed somewhere. Meanwhile, your actual combat units are out there somewhere leveling up, your cities are asking for more housing, and your god is either in the sky or physically stuck babysitting a region because you thought it would be fun to smite things in person. It's a damn good game, where divine power means always having one more job, and every treasure chest is just another logistics problem in disguise. Up next at number 9 is Greyhack. This is a massively multiplayer hacking simulator built like a believable fake operating system. So the core gameplay loop is living inside of a desktop, taking jobs for money and reputation, prowling through procedurally generated networks, and using the terminal as your primary tool, as it's modeled on real Unix commands. Online mode runs as a persistent world that stays active 24/7, so changes you make can be noticed later by other players, which is certainly neat. Single player exists too, and it pauses when you quit, which is basically the only time this game will offer you a warm blanket. Every target network is configured differently, so the game rewards process and adaptability, and it expects you to think about access, backdoors, and cleanup as part of the job rather than a victory lap. Persistence makes that all the harder, because the universe keeps moving when you're offline, which means yesterday's shortcut can become tomorrow's problem when someone stumbles across the evidence you left behind with all the subtlety of a toddler and a wall of finger paint. The real rabbit hole here, however, is tool creation. Terminal commands and exploits are built using the in-game scripting language, so you can modify existing tools or write your own, which turns progression into an arms race between the problems you encounter and the utilities that you wish you had 5 minutes ago. Then the sandbox layer adds social pressure, since the game supports publishing web pages to share what you've built, forming guilds, and organizing coordinated attacks against other players, so the safest plan on paper could always become a matter of public embarrassment on down the line. If you don't understand programming or have no interest in trying to, you need not apply. But for those of you with fast fingers and a hard-on for ones and zeros, you don't want to miss this.
Number 10. 5D chess with multiverse time travel.
The first time you move a knight into yesterday and it shows up on a fresh board that didn't exist 10 seconds ago, you're gonna understand that chess has officially escaped from the lab. 5D chess with multiverse time travel takes the familiar 8x8 and stacks it into a whole filing system of boards spread across time and parallel timelines, so each position becomes a snapshot in a bigger structure. Moving into the past does not rewrite history, it branches a new timeline, which is how the game avoids paradoxes and why the map of boards keeps growing as the match heats up. Alongside standard versus play, it includes puzzles built around multiverse tactics, AI opponents with different personalities, and online matches with a slick interface that helps visualize how pieces travel through this mess without you needing to draw it on a whiteboard and lose what little friends that you have left. What really gets you is the turn structure and the geometry, and they lean on each other constantly. Time and timelines are real movement axes, so pieces keep their classic identities but gain new routes, with sliding pieces able to travel along time or across timelines, and jumpers distributing their steps across dimensions in ways that are best described as pattern recognition jump scares. You do not play on every board whenever you feel like it. You play on boards where it's your turn, and then you can submit a sequence of moves moves across multiple boards as long as they are legal, which turns a single turn into a small campaign. Timeline management becomes its own game because only so many timelines can stay active, with a rule of thumb that one side cannot maintain more than one extra active timeline over the other, so branching wildly can create inactive lines that do not pull the present towards them. Defense also stops being local, since check is defined across the active present boards and you're expected to protect kings in the present and in the past, which means a safe king on one board can go exist with a king elsewhere that is about to be erased by a move that you have not responded to yet. This game is absurd, and I hate it just as much as I love it at the same time, both yesterday and tomorrow, right now. Number 11, Rift Wizard 2. A pixelated wizard steps into a new realm with a handful of spells and the comforting knowledge that the floor plan has already been filled out with hostile wildlife. Rift Wizard 2 is a turn-based traditional roguelike about building a spell book across a chain of combat maps, clearing each realm, then choosing an exit portal to the next one. Movement and casting are both smooth and deterministic, and the game keeps a central focus on fights over wandering, with portals that preview the sort of trouble and rewards that you're about to sign up for. The complexity kicks in when the game asks you to manage your build like it's a living system. Health and spell charges refill at the end of a level, and SP from memory orbs fuels what you learn, so your purchases have an opportunity cost that carries forward several realms. Upgrades are punchy, but limited to one per spell, which pushes hard choices about breadth versus specialization, especially when enemies bring immunities, arcane shields that blank a hit, and movement quirks that'll mop the floor with one-dimensional plans. Equipment turns the whole thing into a chemistry set, with staves, robes, caps, boots, and trinkets that convert damage types or translate enemy attacks into free casts, and trinkets stack, so a run can pivot from an elemental theme into something assembled from spare parts and curiosity. The portal system keeps that buildcraft center stage, since you can preview enemy mixes and rewards and push toward what your current kit can handle while avoiding that one monster family that treats your best spell like a light breeze. Runs climax by pulling out all the stops. Spawners keep producing enemies on a timer, so long fights get expensive, realm modifiers start showing up deeper in, and later realms introduce enormous multi-tile threats that make targeting rules and area spells behave differently than they did on day one, which is how the game loves to turn a good build into a used-up rag. Rift Wizard 2 is what happens when spellcraft meets logistics, and both elements grant you an equal lack of mercy. Number 12, Whiskerwood. Whiskerwood is a colony and city builder set on tight islands where mice build upward and inward, carving into cliffs and stacking floors to turn scarce space into a functioning settlement. The goal is steady growth despite feline demands, produce goods, keep homes and services running, and move supplies into storage while meeting those regular demands from cat overlords, while pirates occasionally roll up with their own invoice. The early phase is basic survival and expansion, and then the game opens into a steam-powered mousetropolis, where new workshops and housing blocks add another route for workers, another queue at the warehouse door, and another reason to stare at a conveyor line like it personally gnawed through your blueprints, but more on that in a minute. The fun part is how every system shares that same hallway, and the hallway is only wide enough for a mouse. Vertical building and terrain shaping set travel time, and travel time sets output, so stairs, ramps, elevators, and floor placement are economic decisions that cast long shadows. Production chains can deepen quickly, and automation tools like conveyors, warehouses, and logistics hubs decide whether materials reach the right stations on schedule and in the quantity that keeps work moving. Storage rules and pickup settings keep factories from stalling, and a single misconfigured warehouse can reroute the colony's effort into a beautiful loop that accomplishes very little besides cardio. Infrastructure layers on heating, water, and steam networks, and the pipe placement puzzle scales with the city's height and density, and becomes all the more relevant when storms and cold snaps squeeze comfort and farm output at the same time. Citizens add their own friction through traits and preferences that shape where they thrive and what jobs they perform well, so staffing is a matchmaking problem between mice, neighborhoods, and the industrial footprints that you've created. External demands keep everything under a timer, since taxes and ransoms arrive whether the supply chain feels like chaining or not, which makes stockpiles and throughput planning part of survival. Rail and other movement systems can ease congestion across larger builds, and they bring their own cost, capacity limits, and choke points that demand careful placement and planning, so build Build high, dig deep, root carefully, and remember, the only thing faster than your supply lines is a cat's patience running out. Number 13, Nebulous Fleet Command. In this game, you'll build a hand-tailored fleet of warships and fight tactical battles in good old 3D space, using deliberate movement controls and precision targeting. What sets it apart is how seriously it treats sensory and deception. Radar, electronic warfare, and the limits of the information you can actually trust are the center of the experience. Most of the time, you're not looking at a clean, perfect enemy outline. You are managing tracks of varying quality, deciding when to emit or hide, and when to accept. Your decisions are based on a suspicious smudge moving to the left. The tension comes from how every decision changes the picture you're fighting inside. Radar choices and jamming are a constant tug of war because strong emissions help you find targets and also give the enemy something to notice, while jamming can deny detection and force reliance on scouts, burn through, or better fire control solutions to get an accurate track. Weapons planning plugs directly into that, especially missiles, since they hit hard but come with limited ammunition, can be intercepted, and are constrained by salvo preparation, so you end up thinking about timing, saturation, and what your opponent's defenses can realistically swat down. Maneuvering is no minigame either, because angles and spacing affect who can see, who can support, and whether your own fleet blocks lines of fire, and the wrong turn can morph a clean firing solution into a fleet-wide apology tour. Fleet design adds another layer of commitment, since building around certain sensors, launch capacity, and electronic support changes the problems that you can solve on the fly, and it's very easy to discover mid-battle that you brought the perfect answer to a question that nobody asked. Nebulous is a war game where the first casualty is always certainty that you may have to bet your fleet on. Number 14, Prison Architect. Bleep-a-ba-bum. So this is a game about the time-honored tradition of building a perfectly rational system and then populating it with questionable humans who immediately begin stress testing your work. You start with an empty plot and a budget, lay down concrete, slap in cells, and wire up power and water like you're building a very unfriendly aquarium, but with bars. And then the buses arrive, the intake line forms, and your prison goes from blueprint to live performance in about 6 seconds. Things kick off relatively manageable, feed people, keep them from stabbing each other, and try not to bankrupt the place by hiring 40 guards to supervise one guy sweeping. But the prison is basically a machine made of schedules and choke points. If the kitchen can't cook fast enough, the canteen becomes a crowd simulator. If the shower block is too small, everyone's needs spike at the same time, and your hallways start to resemble a slow-moving weather system. So it's not uncommon for your best intentions to be translated into a complete disaster. Security is where the game gets deliciously petty. You can build walls thick enough to survive a siege, and an inmate will still defeat you with a stolen spoon and enough free time. Contraband slips in through visitors, deliveries, careless pathing, or that one corridor that you swear you'd fix later. Searches help, but searches also make people angry, and angry people become big old tattooed problems. Cameras, patrol routes, dog handlers, informants, and solitary all work, but they work like tools, not magic. Every layer you add creates maintenance, staffing, and timing issues that will absolutely show up when you're least spiritually prepared to deal with them. And then there's the economy. That new wing is expensive, and staff paychecks are forever, so good luck balancing the bloody budget. The best part is when everything runs smoothly for about 5 minutes, long enough for you to think you've solved it, right before a tunnel pops up under your perimeter wall because that guy you made angry turned out to be Houdini's degenerate grandson. This game, at its core, is the art of turning rectangles into routines, and routines into problems that you can hopefully afford to fix. Number 15, WARNO. Behold, a real-time Cold War tactics game set in alternate 1989, where you command a battle group built from a specific division's roster, and then fight over Chungus maps with infantry, armor, artillery, helicopters, aircraft, air defense, and of course, logistics that keep them from becoming expensive lawn ornaments. The signature twist is how much the game ties victory to force design and operational context. Your battle group choices define your options in every fight, and army general campaigns actually add a turn-based layer where you move formations on a strategic map and then play the actual battles out in real time with what you've committed, a la Total War. The match layer runs on command zones and hard decisions that'll age you in dog years. Zones generate income buys reinforcements, and capturing zones requires command units, the adorable little starred leaders who stroll into a sector and declare it yours. After a sector is captured, the command unit can move on, and the sector stays under control until an enemy command unit contests it, so commanders become roaming real estate agents in the world's worst housing market. Recon drives everything because sightlines are shaped by forests, towns, and hills, and seeing first is often the difference between a clean ambush and a gunpowder-infused pounding. Your points will tick in over time, so spending early buys map presence while saving affords heavier toys. Air power can swing fights, but anti-air systems can swat planes out of the skies, so a well-defended front looks awfully similar to New Year's in Beijing. Artillery is great for breaking dug-in units and punishing anything that sits still for too long, but it burns through ammo fast, and that ammo is actually a supply truck that has to drive to the front without getting the smoking crater treatment. Beyond ammo, these logistics keep vehicles fueled and repaired, and when it fails, your elite armor becomes nothing more than a camouflage statue. The game offers smart orders and rules of engagement to reduce micromanagement, but sometimes your units like to interpret advance carefully as take the most scenic route through the oncoming fire, which is certainly annoying, but far from game-breaking. After all, there's no such thing as a perfect battle, only slightly less disastrous ones where the victor is he who runs out of gas last. Number 16. Spacechem. Imagine someone looks at chemistry, then over at programming, and then to you, and decides the only right thing to do is lock you in a tiny room with a grid and a stopwatch. You play as a reactor engineer for a corporation that has never met a safety regulation that it couldn't ignore, and your job is to turn input molecules into exact target molecules, continuously, without the machine drifting out of sync and turning into a very expensive doorstop. There's no way to cheese this game. You build a process, a loop, a tiny factory that runs forever, which means mistakes become recurring appointments. The heart of the game is the reactor, a cramped board with input and output ports, along with special tiles that let you bond atoms, break bonds, rotate structures, and generally rearrange matter in ways that would make a real chemist call a lawyer. 2 robot arms called Waldos do all the work, and you don't pilot them, you program them. Each Waldo follows a track that you draw, and along that track you place commands like grab, drop, rotate, bond, split, fuse, and sync, and they run at the same time, on a loop, which means you are basically writing 2 tiny concurrent programs that share workspace and absolutely will block each other like co-workers fighting over the only functioning printer. As the levels ramp up, the game starts demanding not just the correct molecule, but the correct molecule at a decent rate. This is where Spacechem reveals its true hobby, teaching you that timing, space, and your patience are resources, and it plans to drain all 3. You'll build handoff routines where one Waldo prepares a molecule and the other finishes it. You'll park atoms in little buffer corners so that the rhythm doesn't fall off, and you'll uncover that a design that can work perfectly for 10 cycles can then jam on the 11th just because one rotation happened 1 beat late. It's not a bug. This is this game's personality. And then, after you solve a puzzle, Spacechem scores you. It judges your solution on how many cycles it takes and how many instruction symbols you use, how many reactors you needed, and it does this with the confidence of a teacher who has never once built a reactor but has strong opinions about your efficiency. So you'll rebuild the thing you just finished, because what the hell else are you gonna do? You've already accepted that your free time is now company property. Up next is number 17, Foundation. This is a city builder that skips the rigid grid and instead hands you a paintbrush. You actually paint where homes are allowed. You mark areas for logging, quarrying, farming, hunting, and your villagers fill in the space with roads and neighborhoods based on what they actually do all day, with awesome results as the settlement has an organic feel and look, even when it's clearly making choices without consulting you. The big hook is how the important buildings are not single blocks that you plop down and forget. Churches, monasteries, manors, and other landmark institutions work more like construction projects you expand piece by piece, choosing modules and functions as you go. So instead of build the church and done, you build the church and keep adding more and more parts to it until it becomes an elaborate cathedral, for instance. It's a very classy way to hide the fact that you're about to spend 20 minutes rotating a wall segment because medieval architecture demands that sort of drama. Then the real fun kicks in. Everything depends on distance, labor, and the movement of goods. Production chains are straightforward in concept. Wood becomes planks, wheat becomes flour and bread, stone becomes refined materials, but these resources don't have legs their own. Villagers have to carry it, store it, sell it, use it, and the town's layout decides whether that happens smoothly or becomes a daily pilgrimage across half the map. A building can be built and still be effectively useless if workers spend their lives walking to the resource, walking to storage, walking to the market, and then returning home to celebrate another productive day of making one loaf of bread. Money and progression add extra clay plates to keep spinning. Taxes and trade push growth forward, but they also influence happiness and supply stability, because people tend to notice when the treasury is thriving, yet their dinner is, shall we say, theoretical. And just to keep it from becoming a purely pacifistic building toy, there's a military layer here too, where you send trained villagers on missions. That pulls workforce out of the economy and asks you to balance ambition with the boring reality that your town still needs bread, firewood, and someone to move crates around while your soldiers go earn glory off screen. Foundation is town planning as a living system, where the prettiest stone skyline can still collapse because your bakery was 2 hills away from your flour. Number 18. Path of Achra. In Path of Achra, you're introduced into a bleak, old-school dungeon crawl where the real fight starts at character creation. You build a run by mixing culture, class, and religion, which sets your stats and, more importantly, your starting effects. The game is built for fast experimentation, so it wants you to try something, watch it either work beautifully or crap the bed, and then immediately queue up another attempt with a slightly more unhinged plan. What earns this spot as a complex game is how much power is packed into a tiny control scheme. The game's controls are offensively simple. Every turn offers you 4 options: attack, step, stand still, or pray, and that's it. And it works, because the real machinery is hidden underneath. Abilities, passives, and gear all trigger off your actions, your location, your enemy's actions, and even your previous triggers. One button press can become a multi-step detonation chain where sparks fly, monsters die, and your input was technically just moving to the left. The deeper you go, the more your character becomes an engine of cascading nonsense. Prayer builds in particular can turn standing still into a spiritual airstrike. There's also a mechanic called glory, which feeds you new powers and rare loot as you push onward, so the game snowballs whether you want it to or not. It's not a game where the interface overwhelms you. It's a game where your own synergies do, and the funniest part is that the dungeon becomes background noise once your build starts to behave like a self-propelled nuclear incident. Number 19 is Avorion. Avorion is a space sandbox where you build your ship out of blocks. Your hull shape, engines, cargo space, shields, turrets, and internal systems all come from what you physically bolt together, so upgrade is synonymous with redesign here. The galaxy is chopped into sectors you jump between, each one a fresh mix of asteroids, factions, stations, pirates, and opportunities to make decisions that you will defend loudly for 5 minutes and regret quietly for 3 hours. Progress is tied to materials, so you start with basic metals and then climb up through higher tiers, and each step lets you build tougher ships with better gear, which is empowering until you meet something that also climbed that ladder but brought friends. The complexity comes from how every normal goal creates follow-up problems that demand new systems. You could be mining to reach the next material tier, but mining leads to refitting for stronger hull and better tools. Refitting leads to higher power and crew needs, and that leads to the need of designing a ship that can still move and fight after you've added everything that those tasks require. You could focus on trading, but trading leads to expanding cargo capacity to needing defenses and escorts lead to managing more ships than you can manually babysit. However, captains let you assign ships to automated operations from the galaxy map, which works out, but be emotionally prepared to check in and see a ship doing its job faithfully in the worst neighborhood possible. Building stations and factories can fund the whole empire, but now you're managing supply inputs, production outputs, sector security, and faction relations, because a profitable station is basically a sign that says, "Come with me." Combat ties back into the editor too, since survivability is not just more health, it's how you place critical systems, how you protect them, and how your ship behaves when parts start getting blown off. And by the time you win a hard fight, you'll know why you won, and that's the kind of payoff that keeps you coming back for more. Number 20, My Winter Car. Oh yeah, we're talking about this one. My Winter Car is a first-person survival and car ownership sim set in a Finnish winter where darkness, cold, and unfortunate decisions are all on the menu. You're expected to manage body temperature and basic survival while still acting like a functional adult, which is generous of the game. It's also positioned as a sequel for people who already understand the general flavor of suffering from My Summer Car, so it assumes you know there's no such thing as a normal day. The centerpiece of the game is the project car. You assemble, fix, tune, and maintain it with a level of detail that turns I'll just install this part into a full afternoon of crawling around and checking for what you may have forgotten. There are around 200 unique parts, and the point is that the car behaves like a machine with needs. You can aim for a reliable daily driver or chase performance for racing, and the game is happy either way as long as you pay for it in effort. Money is the quiet villain that never takes a day off. Parts cost cash, repairs cost time, and the game pushes you into doing jobs to keep the build moving, which means your schedule is a rotation of work, wrenching, and maintaining food and warmth. It also includes other usable vehicles, including a truck and a tractor, which you're responsible for operating responsibly, but they won't give you nearly as much hell as the car. But yeah, about that driving. Snowy forest roads, icy highways, and even ice roads across a lake, because we should normalize taking our cars ice skating. The game includes rallying and circuit racing too, plus the option to spectate, which is perfect for anyone who enjoys motorsports but also enjoys having an undented car. Add realistic law enforcement and permadeath, and even the most simple trip can become a disaster of biblical proportions. Number 21, Ymir. So this is a 4X strategy game fused to a city builder where you develop a civilization of pigmen starting in the Stone Age and try to survive long enough to become somebody else's problem. You play on 2 connected layers, a world map for expansion and politics, and an isometric regional map where each claimed title becomes a real town with streets, production sites, and defenses. Regions generate with different terrain and resources, so expansion is a commitment to solving a new set of shortages elsewhere. The complexity here lives in the economy simulation. Citizens sort into social classes with different buying power. Goods have prices that change with supply and demand, and your construction choices feed right back into the market because materials are purchased at market value. You can build more workshops and still end up worse off if you flood the market and turn your proud industry into a money pit that employs everybody and helps nobody. The game even has policy layers that change how pricing and exchange work, so fixing the price on one good could have negative outcomes for a good that you may need later. Then it stacks multiplayer on top, including persistent servers intended to run around the clock, where games can stretch across days or weeks, and diplomacy becomes a full-time job that other players do part-time. Treaties, trade arrangements, permissions to cross borders, internal politics, and taxation can matter as much as building placement, because your neighbor's friendly agreement might be more pig-headed than you first suspect. War is where all that planning gets put to the test. Battles happen in real time on the same regional map as your cities, so walls, gates, towers, platforms, and terrain shaping are survival tools. You can engineer choke points, create layered defenses, and use the landscape to force attackers into slow approaches, while AI-controlled troops execute your plan with varying levels of success at staying alive. It's also early access, and Steam flags that the last dev update was over 12 months ago, so it can feel rough, but if you want a strategy game where economy, politics, city layout, and warfare all collide in the same place, this here may be your piggy. Number 22, Command Modern Operations. Holy moly, this one. Command Modern Operations puts you into the role of a modern commander with a planet-sized map and a very busy message log. It's a real-time, pausable military sim that can cover engagements from post-World War II era through the present day and beyond, using aircraft, ships, submarines, ground units, bases, and more, all interacting in the same battle space. What makes it stand out is the command and control focus. You're managing how an entire force behaves, what it's allowed to do, and what it's allowed to reveal about itself, while you try to keep the whole operation from becoming a show. The headache begins with uncertainty, because the game treats detection like its own battlefield. Contacts are shaped by sensors, terrain, altitude, and line of sight, so the map often looks less like a chessboard and more like a whiteboard that someone is continuously erasing and redrawing. You'll spend time deciding what you actually know before deciding what you're willing to shoot, or what you're willing to do about it, and those two decisions are rarely friends. Then it hands you policy tools sharp enough to cut the wrong artery. Doctrine and rules drive behavior across the whole side, including rules of engagement, weapons release authority, and emissions control, so you can tell your forces when to radiate, when to stay dark, and what counts as acceptable force. Missions turn that into automation. You build patrols, strikes, support tasks, routes, and reference point geometry. Then time compression lets the simulation run faster until your CPU begs for mercy. Finally, the game gives you infinite content and thus infinite ways to create more problems. There's a quick battle generator for fast setups, a powerful scenario editor, and built-in LUA scripting so scenarios can react and escalate. There are even reference databases because platform, sensor, and weapon details aren't decorative. They determine what your tools can actually do, and optional TAC view support can visualize the chaos in 3D if you want your errors with better camera angles. So if you want a different type of strategy game, Command Modern Operations is less about your fast fingers and more about knowing what the hell you're doing, or at least pretending to until you do. Number 23, Slice and Dice. A party of 5 heroes walks into a 20-fight dungeon run, and odds are, you know the rest of the joke. Slice and Dice is a turn-based tactics roguelike, where each hero has a unique die, and every fight becomes a little barter with probability. The game's signature move is Radical Honesty. It avoids hidden mechanics and shows you exactly what's coming, and then watches you roll a blank anyway. Rounds start with you rolling your party's dice, locking in the good results and re-rolling the ones that came out disrespectful. You get 2 re-rolls available each turn, which is enough to feel hopeful, but not enough to feel safe. Then you assign those dice faces to targets in the right order, because sequencing is what life is all about, and the game lets you undo actions as much as you like, which is nice and also deeply enabling for anyone with a perfectionist streak. And in between all those fights, you level up a hero or take an item, and that's where runs start to mutate. Items can change a die face, add keywords, or turn a normal action into something that only shines when it's paired with the right hero kit and the right timing. So a party can go from stable to weak AF in one pickup. The game's content pool is huge, with 128 hero classes and 473 items, so the real challenge becomes building a team that can survive bad rolls without turning into a support group. Also, losing a single fight ends the run, which keeps decisions feeling tense in the same way a tightrope keeps every step feeling meaningful. Then it adds extra spice, lots of modes, infinite curses that twist rules, online leaderboards, and modding for players who look at a balance system and think, yeah, but what if it screamed? This game is a pure tactical experience, where the outcomes are personal, and the dice never apologize. Number 25. Number 25 or number 24? What is this? The hell? Oh, this is number 24. So, number 24. Number 24, Empyrion, Galactic Survival. So it starts like any other survival game, gather rocks, punch trees, but slowly it turns into an obsessive blend of DIY engineering, logistical micromanagement, and interstellar remodeling. What sets it apart is how fast just getting off this damn planet morphs into adding a 6th thruster because the ship felt sluggish during evasive maneuvers. In the early hours, it's all about staying alive long enough to ask why your constructor keeps demanding cobalt like it's a rare delicacy. You're salvaging scrap and unlocking blueprints from a tech tree that assumes your end goal is a flying fortress with cup holders. Combat comes in 2 speeds. I have a rifle and no cover, and I made a ship with 17 guns and 0 armor on the core. Bigger planets mean more danger, which demands better ships, which demands more mining, which demands a brief vacation to go scream near a lake. But eventually, you will cross a line, and now you're sketching hovercraft designs on napkins during dinner. Empyrion splits your projects into hover vessels, smaller vessels, capital ships, and bases, each with their own roles and increasingly elaborate energy diets. You can enable mass and volume limits so cargo needs to be loaded, and if that sounds like fun, just wait until you discover CPU limits. Yes, ships have virtual processors, and yes, you can install extenders to fit more guns and refrigerators. And just when you think you've stabilized your empire, you're handed Reforged Eden, a community scenario that rebalances the entire game and gently puts forward that everything you've built is a lie. Empyrion treats modded and vanilla gameplay like alternate realities. There's also official DLC like Dark Faction, which adds creepy ship parts, melee weapons, and fresh enemies for your cargo hauler to accidentally ram at 200 meters per second. To put it plainly though, it's all about galactic survival and understanding that you're the kind of person who really should care where to put the refrigerator on that damn warship. Number 25, Bladesong. A sword order has arrived at your forge in Arran Keep, and it reads like a contract written by someone who has never lifted anything heavier than a quill. Bladesong is a sword smithing sim in which the main event is crafting weapons for commissions and upgrading your workshop so that you can keep saying yes to increasingly picky requests. Interesting bit is the hands-on toolset, freeform blade shaping paired with modular hilts, so your decisions live and die in metal shaping and balance points. You start with a limited pool of action points and spend them taking jobs and doing the work. Pick a commission that's too ambitious and the day ends with a half-finished masterpiece, an empty purse, and the spiritual sensation of dropping a sandwich face down. Pick too safe and you'll progress, but you also learn how it feels to be outperformed by the guy up the road selling sharp sticks. The real brain food shows up once you start chasing requirements that play against each other. Blade geometry affects weight and handling, so making something longer or broader changes how it behaves, and then the hilt becomes a counterweight problem that you solve with modular parts. Each adjustment pushes another value around, so the work becomes iteration, measurement, and trade-offs, with commissions acting like external rules that force you to design with intention. The day system ties into that pressure, because you're balancing materials, workload, and reputation gains while trying to deliver something that meets the spec and feels right. Bladesong stays upbeat because the systems reward experimentation and give you space to chase the ideal craft loop. Creative mode is there for players who want to build absurd museum pieces without worrying about schedules, and the early access foundation already delivers the satisfaction of making a sword of nearly any size and shape. It is a crafting sim where progress feels tangible, and each swing of the hammer sparks that love for blacksmithing that you didn't even know that you had. Number 26, Mine Mogul. A cave the size of a small country opens up beneath your feet and immediately starts collecting rent in the form of all your free time. This is a physics-based underground automation sandbox where you dig tunnels, mine resources, buy machines, and build conveyor networks deep below the surface until your small setup becomes a whole-ass industrial operation. The unique hook is that everything you move is a physical object, so production problems show up as actual pile-ups, spills, and occasionally rock fountains that suggest your factory is trying to escape. It feels great when it clicks because the cave is not some neat grid. It's awkward geometry you have to tame with belts, routing, and pure stubbornness to quit. The depth comes from how the cave layout, the physics, and your upgrade path all push on each other at the same time. Routing is a constant design fight because tight turns, uneven chambers, and elevation changes forces you to think about belt length, choke points, and how to expand without turning your main artery factory into a parking lot. Flow control becomes its own discipline once throughput rises, since splitters and smarter routing pieces exist for a reason, including a true 50-50 roller splitter added in the Age of Steel update, because close enough can quickly become, oh my god, half my base is knee-deep in ore. Scaling adds the longer arc pressure, since the same update brought in steel production with a casting furnace and molds, plus new item types and machines like heavy auto miners and a cluster breaker for ore clusters and geodes, which shifts the game from basic mining automation into multi-step processing with new bottlenecks to solve. There are also new quests to steer you towards the next tier, which is helpful guidance and a way of saying congratulations, you've now mastered the tutorial, now please invent logistics. And because this is physics first, the cost of overbuilding is visible, both in the mess on the floor and in the amount of motion your machine is asking the game to simulate. But that's also the fun, and you don't know what fun is until you've unraveled physics-driven bottlenecks. Number 27, Laysara, Summit Kingdom. Your first building site in Laysara is a ledge that looks like it was designed by a vengeful mountain goat. This is a city builder where you found settlements high on steep terrain, build production chains, and keep the three-caste society supplied while the weather keeps initializing surprise complaints. What makes it unique is the setting doing half the game design for you. The mountain is both your map and your main constraint, and the long-term ambition is pushing all the way to the summit to raise a temple, all while moving an economy uphill with your bare hands and a herd of yaks. The complexity is a result of the way transport, survival planning, and growth all yank at the same rope. Moving goods is a starring system, because roads, bridges, shafts, and lifts are how anything exists at altitude, and a single bad route choice can make a working supply line into a scenic queue that lasts until spring. Production chains add another layer, because every new household and workshop increases demand, and demand forces more hauling across vertical choke points that cannot be widened without rebuilding half the mountainside, and then avalanches show up as the world's least patient building inspector. You can prepare with forests, barriers, and controlled releases, but the real skill is deciding where to spend effort so that the inevitable slide does not erase the part of the town that you need. Multiple settlements deepen the puzzle further, since separate mountains can support each other through trade, which really just creates a kingdom-wide dependency graph held together by footpaths and optimism. The Summit project caps it all with a requirement for safe routes and massive throughput at the highest elevation, so the only easy plan is the one that you may have abandoned 2 hours ago. Laysara is the unique challenge of building a kingdom on a slope and understanding that gravity is just another stakeholder. Number 28, Endless Space 2. Endless Space 2 runs on a turn-based 4x rhythm. Explore, expand, exploit, exterminate. But it keeps the camera close enough that new colonies feel like adopting a hungry pet that you now have to budget for. Each system becomes its own little engine, built from planet types and population traits, where food, industry, dust, and science push and pull while approval decides whether your empire performs like a sleek star yacht or a futuristic shopping cart. The economy isn't your only problem, because influence and politics keep leaning over your shoulder like a manager who's discovered the concept of key performance indicators. Parties will fill a senate, laws tilt your empire-wide bonuses, and your choices influence which factions gain power, which changes what laws you can pass next. Expand too greedily and you pay for it in approval, and then you spend influence to patch the cracks, and then you realize you needed that influence to keep a neighbor friendly, and now your diplomatic handshake is a non-diplomatic shakedown. War looks cinematic, but the real fight happens before the lasers even start. Ship design is just as important as loadouts, and combat tactics shape how engagement ranges play out across phased battles. Scout wrong and you bring armor to a missile argument. Pick the wrong tactic and your fleet brainlessly drives into range where it gets deleted, and the post-battle report becomes more of a eulogy. Of course, all of it escalates because every system ties to another system. Expansion stresses approval, which slows development, which delays military power, which invites hostility, which makes diplomacy more expensive, which makes laws harder to fund, which changes the whole economic shape again. Add faction asymmetry on top, where different empires bend the rules in their own direction, and the galaxy turns into an eternal tug of war. Endless Space 2 can make you feel brilliant, right before it hands you all of the problems that you personally invented.